Okay, as you're finishing up your massage, let me welcome you to Wednesday night practice. How is everybody? I hope you're well. And thanks for joining us for practice. And my talk tonight really springs from the times that we live in, trying to understand these turbulent times through the teachings and the practice of Buddha Dharma. They're turbulent times. There's uncertainty, there's fear, there's discomfort. And of course, for many people, the vast socioeconomic and political changes, they're losing their jobs. They wonder where their next meal or their shelter is going to come from. Really tremendous suffering and change going on. And then, of course, we think about those who have been sick and whose family and friends have died. Almost 140,000 people now that we count. And such grief. And also thinking about the healthcare workers. I can't imagine spending 3 or 4 months taking care of such sick people, not being able to do much for them since we don't have a cure. And in fact, you routinely hear about just the human, compassionate care that they give, where they sit down and hold somebody's hand, somebody who is perhaps dying away from their family and friends. And just make a connection with them so that they feel loved and supported. So in addition to the COVID great upheavals, of course, we have what's been called the greatest social movement in the United States in response to George Floyd's death at the knee of what looked like an indifferent policeman, someone who is hired and paid to serve the citizens. It's just startling. And I think many of us now have the time and the stillness to reflect on our society, to reflect on these visible and frequent images of injustice, inequality, and are really exploring with more intention than maybe many of us have, speaking for myself, for some time. Our eyes have really been awakened by everything that's going on, and yet, ironically, we are mostly taking that in from the comfort of our homes. Not being able to get out, not being able to do our normal routines. And so, we have this, this paradox, this discrepancy about how in a time of isolation, we actually are experiencing more intimacy and more connection in some ways to people and to issues and to values than perhaps we had before that. So I guess, out of lemons come lemonade, and there always are positive things that come out of everything. But I want to start with telling you a story of something that made a profound impact on my life. I believe it was 1985. I was in Tucson, Arizona, and walking through the mountainous desert there on a hike one evening after a business conference. And I was with someone, but they were apart from me and we weren't talking. And I came upon this just beautiful boulder. It was maybe waist high. Those of you who know me know I am pretty fond of rocks. And this boulder just drew me to it with its beauty. There were lichens and moss and so many colors on it. I just observed it. I just enjoyed it. not trying to say what everything was or what kind of rock it was. No words and language. I just observed it. And looking closer, I saw there were cracks from the millennia that rock had sat there. And there were concave areas where other rock had been carved out of it, maybe by the rain, maybe by wind, maybe by lizards, scampering over it. And in fact, I saw one of those concave areas right below it. The rock that had fallen out of it had fallen out as almost like a round group of rocks. They were together on the ground. And I looked down and I got down at them to look at them because, they were part of the boulder and yet now they were separate. And as I looked back up at the boulder, I was amazed at how different it looked. I couldn't see the colors. The sun was in my eyes. The boulder was so big. It was a whole different boulder. It was a different perspective. And as I got up, I looked around at that boulder from every angle and perspective I could imagine. And I was really, really struck by the fact that we have this option, this opportunity to freely see all perspectives all the time. And a lot of what keeps us from seeing different perspectives is our biases, our opinions, what in Buddhism they call the self, where we're basically projecting onto everything. So this experience left a deep impression on me. It's something that I think back on a lot. I felt very connected to that rock. I realized that I was experiencing it without trying to judge it or categorize it or do all the language things that I normally would do. And we've all had these moments, I guess, when our discursive minds rest, when we have stillness and we connect with nature or with other people without words, without, any of our biases. And our minds are alert, fully engaged, and nothing, it's a wonderful moment. It's a precious moment. And I can only imagine that this is a lot of what life would be like if we were awakened, if we were able to view the world from a very free, liberated perspective. So I want to start very briefly by just covering the core principles of Buddhism, because to me, I go back to those all the time. And of course, I'm constantly trying to understand them and put them in context. But I think in these turbulent times, they're really, really powerful. One of the first principles is that our world, our life is impermanent. Everything is constantly changing. It's our grasping and our biases and our strong views that keep things fixed and keep openness from being alive in us. So Guagu says, whatever you can't let go of, that's your obstacle, that's your vexation. And of course, that is also your barrier to being free. And really the Buddhist business, if you will, is about freeing the mind, seeing the mind and freeing the mind. So the first principle is one of impermanence, and recognizing then, how do we deal with life that's impermanent? How do we try to grasp onto it, and how can we learn not to do that? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Of course, meditation is really the opportunity to see how our mind works. During meditation, as thoughts arise, we observe the kinds of things that are going through our mind pretty much all the time. and we're not conscious of them. If there are self-criticisms going, which I know was very common for me when I started meditating, it made me see how critical I could be of myself and how that judgment that I have is not only for myself, but for others. We also, you know, whatever we think, maybe it makes us happy or it makes us sad. We are not independent of our thoughts. Guagu talks about us being a puppet on a string, kind of relegated to what our thoughts are. And so the meditation is important in part because it really helps us see who we are. We are, of course, built on our history. We're built based on our karma, on our family upbringing, on our experiences. And yet we are not the prisoner of those things. We can be free of them. But the first thing we have to do is understand them and see them, and then work towards change. A second core Buddhist principle is called emptiness, even though it's not really what it sounds like. Emptiness, as Maria said the other day, means empty of any separate identity. So it really reflects the fact that all things are interconnected, that everything is part of everything else. Our relationships are really what our life is. And I don't just mean, you know, the relationships of sister, daughter, friend. I'm eating lettuce tonight because some workers in the California Valley picked it and it was transported to here. Or more likely, actually, I ate peppers tonight at dinner that Derek and Aaron grew on their farm and brought Saturday morning in the veggie delivery. So everything is connected and we're not independent. We're not separate. We can't always understand that interdependence, but this is part of what, through meditating, through practicing, our stilled mind allows wisdom to emerge, to see the moment like it is, and to be fully in that moment, so that we can respond to the moment with what needs to be done and what should be done, without just operating from our own point of view or how we would want things done. So the third essential teaching in Buddhism is basically no self. So our self is a construct, just like race is a construct. We're talking about that tonight. It's a construct that we build over our lifetime based on our histories and our experience. Our thoughts liberate themselves. Who we are changes, but what we mostly see is what we're holding on to tightly and grasping onto so that we feel comfortable, we feel in control. And this is the way we're raised, that we are a unique individual. And in many ways we are, and yet we are more or less than that as well. So I know when you view from no self, when you can experience from no self, there's a tremendous openness to it. I think when I was looking at that boulder and experiencing that boulder, I was viewing it from a perspective of no self. Again, it didn't mean that I didn't know where I was or what to do or anything like that. You still have all of your intelligence and all of your, even your memories and so forth. But you're not trying to externally make everything about your internal issues. So Guagu said, if we see the wrong in others, we have reified that view and made it solid or permanent. Then we are grasping onto our own view of them rather than letting them be free. And this is very powerful to me. I think about this a lot. In a sense, when you have biases or you relive the memories of people that you've maybe had some angry words with or other things, you're basically killing that relationship because you're not letting it be open. You're keeping it fixed in a way that probably doesn't relate to reality anymore, but is all about your own views and biases. And so when I think of today's world and what we're doing, this idea of being open to all perspectives really strikes a chord, because we have a lot of biases and perspectives. All of us do. A lot of them are unconscious, but part of what we're doing these days is examining those things. It doesn't have to be through meditation. It can be through talking to others, listening, watching movies, reading things, all the ways that we're exploring other kinds of things. So in our practice, we want to be able to respond to people as they are, without inserting ourselves and our own opinions or biases into that relationship. So how do we practice in these turbulent times? Well, let's keep in mind these three principles: impermanence, no self, and interconnectedness or emptiness. And let's think about some of the ways that we can practice. First, I think we can understand how our mind works. I know as a social scientist, behavioral economics has really brought modern psychology and evolutionary biology into our study, so that we see that a lot of the ways we are and that we react come through evolutionary mechanisms. You know, when we respond to fear, we are ready to run. We know through a lot of psychological experiments that we remember negative things much more than we do positive things. Presumably, this is necessary to keep from being the next victim of the Tyrannosaurus, or I guess it was later than that humans started. But we have biases and stereotypes, and we tend to see things as us versus them. This is the tribal background in us. We have social hierarchies. We operate from that, and power and influence has been something that most human societies are built from. So when we look at our own society today, one can certainly see how white privilege has grown out of many aspects of our kind of innate human tendencies. So we have to recognize those things and take measures to counteract them. We know that if we don't counteract them, we will just fall into them. And for example, psychology shows that if we read or hear or see information that goes against our beliefs, our prejudices, that we actually may not even experience it. We may just tune it out. We have to learn how to break those prejudices and stereotypes down in order to really be connected to other people and to the world that we live in, so that we can see it afresh every moment and not be bound and fettered by our past and the way we have thought in the past. A second way we can practice is to read widely, share widely. And I say read, but it can be listening to podcasts, movies, all the things that we have available. In some ways, we almost have information overload. But these can be very important. Certainly sharing with other people, I think, is extremely important, both to see your own biases and learn new information, but also to see their biases and to learn how to, when to nudge that, when to say something about it, how to respond skillfully. There's a book out that's been a bestseller for about 1.5 years called White Fragility. You may have read it or heard about it. Robin DiAngelo wrote it. And basically, I studied it in a FSU book club last fall. And to me, it's kind of a white consciousness raising book. It basically shows how white folks have privilege and we get defensive or we shut down if people call us on our biases and challenge the way things are working. But I know that lately there's been a lot of critique of that too. And in fact, when I'm thinking about practice, this is one of the things I sometimes think about is, well, what is the best way to go? Should I raise my consciousness, try to do internal work, or can I get into external work right away? Well, John McWhorter, who wrote a great book, gosh, decades ago called Losing the Race, he came out yesterday in The Atlantic with an article where he critiqued white fragility considerably. Maybe not surprisingly, he said, why do we have to educate all the white people and try to get their guilt taken care of before we make real social change? Let's just get on with it and change policies, get on with abolishing the inequalities in life that we have in our structured society. So we have all these debates and conflicting views, but this is good. This is good because it helps us understand, but it also helps us see what is in our heart, what draws us to do. Some of us will do political work. Some of us will do other kinds of work. We have to be aware of a lot of different points of view to see the pros and the cons and to develop the skillful means to be able to deal with all the things that we interact with. There is no one right way or one only way to deal with disagreement, with people who are different, and all these other kinds of issues that we are addressing now in turbulent times. So in addition to those two things, we have teachings from the great Chan masters. And I just want to mention a few of my favorite quotes. We have a class now on the Platform Sutra, which is the teachings of the sixth ancestral master, Wei Ning. He said, if you see the wrongs of others, then you yourself are wrong. Discard the fact-finding mind and vexations will be gone. Now, again, this probably resonates with me because I'm very good at fault-finding. But discard the fault-finding mind and vexations will be gone. If you see the wrongs of others, then you yourself are wrong. Master Hsien Yun also talked about not criticizing others, letting them discover themselves about right and wrong. And this is also one of those sort of things that I think about a lot now. You know, when do you say, excuse me, this is really a biased view, or when do you just listen and take it in? But, you know, when you think about all the fault finding that we do in a 24-hour period, I mean, we find faults in ourselves, in our spouses, in our friends, certainly in people we don't know, in our politicians. We may even find faults in our pets, you know, our cats and our dogs and our birds, even though I've never had a dog, but friends who do have dogs tell me one reason they like their dogs is that they never find faults in them. So this is a real practice to take to heart, is discard the fault-finding mind and vexations will be gone. I find it has helped some, but I've got a long ways to go. Master Sheng Yen also said, face whatever is in front of you, act with wisdom, treat people with compassion, forget benefit, harm, gain, and loss, and vexations will diminish. So, you know, if you have an open mind or free mind, if you see what is real and here now, then your anger, your jealousy, your greed, your vexations will diminish. And of course, that forget benefit, harm, gain, and loss is all part of our fault finding, our greed, our jealousy, our basic fundamental ignorance. So again, as Guagu has been talking to us lately, in the moment, in the present, we are free. And to the extent that we can stay with the moment, we are freer than if we're ruminating about the past or planning about tomorrow and other kinds of things. Now, another quote that has made a real impression on me is Guagu said that as a monk and of course as a personal attendant to Master Sheng Yen, once when he was kind of stuck facing obstacles and didn't know what to do, he asked Master Sheng Yen for advice. And Master Sheng Yen said, well, if you see obstacles in front of you, if you're stuck, then turn around from the wall in front of you and you'll see open space. Freedom is always available to you. And to me, you know, maybe the rock illustrates that too for me, but this is such an important perspective, is that, again, we always have the choice to be free. It's not easy. It's something that we have to be, you know, we have to be aware of and constantly looking at or constantly experiencing, but we do have the option always to be free. So any obstacles we have can be overcome. Now, Master Sheng Yen actually gave us advice on how to do that. And I know most of you who've been students of Guagu know what his advice is. He has a sort of a 4-part problem-solving advice. First is you have to face the problem at hand. This is harder than it sounds because facing problems requires both courage and some insight, rather than just blaming others or feeling sorry for ourselves or all the other ways that we kind of shut down and disengage. So we have to face what the problem is. We might ask other people to help us, but we have to articulate and face it. Then secondly, we have to embrace the problem. This to me means take responsibility for it, trying to understand what led to it, what role we play in it. It doesn't mean that we can always do anything about it right away, because causes and conditions are always changing and it may be out of our control to do anything. But in embracing the problem, it frees up, it's sort of like turning around from the wall to see what else might be possible. And then the third step in the process is to go with the flow, to transform. And this is where you use your wisdom of yourself or from other people to consider what are the options, what are the pros and the cons, both analytical things, but also just from the heart. What would feel right, what would be the right thing to do. And once you go through this, then you can let go of the problem. Again, embracing and transforming and going with the flow doesn't always mean that you solve the problem right away, not at all. But once you have gone through those steps, then there is a certain freedom and an opportunity for change that slowly can take place. So this four-step process I find extremely helpful for all kinds of things that I do. And then Master Sheng Yen also said, wisdom is not simply knowledge, nor experience, nor idle speculation. It is an attitude that transcends self-centeredness. So what does this mean? To me, this means that if we operate out of a self-referential view, we're gonna probably harm other people. We'll be selfish. We'll be trying to get something for ourselves or shirk something that we could do. But if we have an attitude that transcends self-centeredness, where we do for others, we do what is the right thing, that we put our nose to the grindstone and work towards what we think are ways to resolve issues, that the wisdom that arises in us will help us see what needs to be done. So Buddhism teaches us that causes and conditions constantly change, and that new relationships emerge among phenomena, new connections are made among people and with our environment. This is called dependent origination. And we can't control all of these changes and conditions, not by a long shot, but we can experience them, we can try to see them, and we can try to use the compassion towards ourselves and others that arise from our meditation when we see our faults and as we diminish our fault finding in others. This transformation begins at a personal level, I think. I mean, I think all of us pretty much find that, but then it goes from there out to a broader level. The internal work begins to seep into the external work. And from these relationships and this place of working with causes and condition, broader social change is possible. Change has to begin with ourselves, because if we go out in the world with our greed and our jealousy and our hatred, all we're doing is just harming others by basically putting our self poisons into their lives. So change begins when we can stop, at least to some extent, our greed, our hatred, our vexations, and that we can think about what others need and how we can act to help them. Guagu often says one of the problems with our vexations is that we want this moment to be different than it is. And I can certainly understand that today. I'm sure all of you can too. I want to be able to go back to my normal life. I want to visit my grandsons and my son and daughter, my son-in-law and daughter in Massachusetts. I want to, do all these things, right? And yet I'm embarrassed to even think that way, because I have a home. I'm not worrying about paying the rent or food or anything. So we can choose to wallow in kind of self-pity and self-centeredness, or we can choose to see this as a temporary condition and offer us perspectives and opportunities that we've never had. And I think that we do have opportunities right now, and I'm sure all of you would be able to come up with things like that. So kind of the last thing I want to talk about is, what can I do about what's going on now? Certainly, as a white folk, I think about this all the time, trying to learn about all of the ways I contribute harm, but also how I can help others. And how do I affect change? So one of the things that I've read, I guess last week, was put together by the National Equity Project. And they have basically 4 levels of what they call our systemic oppression or racism in society. And I have really found thinking about these levels to be helpful as I try to integrate sort of my internal and external views and desire to do something. So the individual level, as it suggests, is our personal beliefs and actions that serve to perpetrate oppression and inequalities. These are often our family teachings, stereotypes, implicit and explicit biases. So these are fundamentally strong in most of us and do have to be dealt with. So there's a lot of consciousness raising and looking in the mirror that needs to be done. Then the interpersonal relationships, of course, as the name suggests, are the interactions between people, both with similar people, whether it be gender, race, age, income, education, occupation. There's ideology, there's so many different ways that we cut and divide ourselves up. But even sticking with race, it's clear that us white folks don't really experience life like most Black folks do. My neighbor is a professor of film, and she has a son, Winton, who's about 13, and she won't let him go out in our neighborhood for a walk because she's scared, even in what seems to be a progressive liberal neighborhood, that he might come to harm being a Black male in a neighborhood. And how can you argue with that given all the things that happen, including, the Aubrey in South Carolina and other places? I can't imagine feeling that way. I never felt that way about my son being out in the neighborhood. So the interpersonal level is also where we see our racist interpretations, maybe our racist language, microaggressions, and our comfort level with people. Because we do have different comfort levels. And of course, we probably live fairly segregated lives. Both our friends and, as people have said, the most segregated place in the country is church on Sundays. So then the next level is the institutional level. And this is the policies and practices in organizations that serve to oppress, take away equal opportunity. I think of schools and how they track Black youth into the dumber classes, how they use suspensions to basically get them in trouble with the law. And a lot of our white youth, and I can speak some from personal experience, may be able to kind of get off and get a lighter hand. And so we also, and even look at the educational curriculum. I mean, how many artists or people of color really are taught? How many teachers do they have? Where are their role models? Our institutional practices are really very white by and large, I think. And of course, our power structures are too. So that's the third level, the institutional level. And for many of us, level where we can make change because we work somewhere. We can be involved there. We are seen as people who have a voice and can speak up about policies and things of that nature. And then, of course, the fourth level is the structural level. And this is where all of these, the lower 3 levels of institutional and individual racism and aggression and inequality come together to keep society as a white dominant society in our case. This could be redlining federal policies in the 20s that prevented banks from giving Black folks loans to buy houses. And continued to not lend money to people in Black areas because of fear of crime or other kinds of things like that. Just the wealth inequality built on generations of wealth that have been passed down is phenomenal. And clearly, when you read about the injustices in the legal system, where people go to jail because they don't have $100 to pay a fine, and then they lose their job, and then they, you know, their family is hurt or destroyed. If you read the police report from Ferguson that the Department of Justice did, it's shocking, because that was a city that almost all of its law enforcement was paid by fines, and paid by fines from very poor people. So that's an area that has to be examined too. Obviously, the legal system and the justice we know in the South has been highly compromised by white privilege. So, you know, in Florida, we're still fighting to get felons access to the vote. They've been disenfranchised right now. The Supreme Court just refused to hear it. We have almost 1 million Black men who can't vote because they've been in jail. I think in Florida now it's 1 in 5 Black men have been in the prison system. This is outrageous, and of course has so much impact on them and their families, and keeps them from being full citizens. So these 4 kind of levels help us identify what we can do, where our wisdom and our intelligence and our abilities can best be done. But they all start with having internal work so that we're not spewing racism without knowing it or without at least acknowledging it. So the internal contemplation comes first. As we do this, we avoid labeling ourselves, we avoid labeling others. We try to see our experiences as causes and conditions that change. We learn from them. As Gwagu often says, the vexations that we have become our resources to help others who have those vexations. So while today we may feel overwhelmed, disoriented, depressed, isolated, we don't have to feel that way. We can open ourselves to more perspectives. We can be kind and gentle with ourselves. We can nourish ourselves and others that we know, and let go of what is unwholesome. We have this choice. This is part of being free. So conclude, I'd like to just leave you with a quote from Master Sheng Yen that I ponder on. I'm not sure that I really understand it yet, but I do think about it. And he said in one of his 108 adages, the 3 acts of success, 1, accord with causes and conditions. So align ourselves with what is real. This is our views, our what we know, how we interact with people. Align ourselves with causes and conditions. Don't try to keep our heads in the sand or be an ignorant person. I don't mean low intelligence, but somebody who fundamentally hasn't done the hard work. Act decisively when causes and conditions arise that we can influence. And we are certainly in a time like that where we do have causes and conditions we can influence. And then he says, shape the future. So I'll end there, leave you with my thoughts on how to practice in turbulent times. I would love to hear